At tomorrow's church board meeting, I will submit a letter informing the board of my intention to retire from full-time pastoral ministry effective on my 65th birthday, which will be February 13th, 3 months from today. 3 months seems to be the prescribed notice recommended for long tenure. And when I count back 3 months from February 13th, we come to this day, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And I think that's a fortuitous occurrence. I want this announcement to be in the context of Thanksgiving for reasons that we will find out about in our message for today. Now, I know that's a rather abrupt way to make an announcement. I'm kind of a pull the Band-Aid off fast kind of guy, especially where a little pain may be involved. Having done it, I already feel a lot better. I can tell you, as a fairly, maybe too transparent person, it has not been natural for me to know about this and not be able to talk about it. I felt a little dishonest sometimes, or people come up and want to have a wedding, and I know I'm not going to be around. You know, what do you say at a time like that? So I'm feeling a lot better. I've not been able to embark upon long-term plans, as in times past. Seems like I always had an iron in the fire, but you don't want to start something that someone else is going to have to finish. May not be part of their vision. The only exception to that has been our recent capital improvements project, and you may have noticed I'm kind of enthusiastic about it, but we realized it had every reason to believe it would be completed before February 13th. So it's a relief getting all this out to you at long last. There remains a lot of uncertainty for you and for me as well, and for Nancy, who's probably wondering what it's going to be like having old Bill underfoot all the time, and for me to know I'm not leaving here to go somewhere, to do something. You may be wondering, I don't know what I'm going to do. I suppose I'll wake up in the morning with absolutely nothing to do and probably go to bed having accomplished only half of it for a while. But after a period to rest, if the past is any guide, I'm sure that God will offer up some new path of service, and that's probably what will happen. But I don't know right now. A great uncertainty lays before me, and a great uncertainty lays before you as well. Who's going to hold down the fort after February 13th? Who's going to, pick up the ball and run with it? What are going to happen with our ministries and the programs and activities? Are they going to suffer in the interim period? A lot of uncertainty before us. When we feel uncertainty, we tend to get anxious about it. And when we get anxious, we can become fearful and we can make some mistakes. So we want to avoid that if we can, and we're going to find out a way to do that today in a message that's entitled A Thanksgiving Hack to Overcome Worry. Now, the word hack, is permutated over time, and most recently quite a bit. Originally, it meant to cut your way through a tangle to get from one place to another, maybe with a machete, hack your way through a rainforest. In this modern cyber age, it took on a new meaning. It meant to enter by stealth into another's computer system and gain unauthorized access to their data, to hack a computer. And then still later, more recently, we hear of life hacks. These are solutions to life's conundrums that make life a little bit easier. If you Google life hack, you'll come up with all sorts of interesting little tricks to make life easier. Like, I don't have a good aim when it comes to hitting a nail with a hammer. I usually hit my thumb or my finger, and then I say something a preacher shouldn't say. So I found a life hack is to hold that nail with one of those spring-loaded clothesline clips, and then if you get nervous and you miss, you're not going to hit your finger in the process. That's a life hack. Today, we're going to expand the meaning a little bit further, adding a spiritual dimension, spiritual hacks that are designed to solve some of our spiritual conundrums that we find ourselves in. And one of them is uncertainty, of worry that's not particularly a productive feeling to have, anxious thoughts. So that's the title of our message this morning, and we're going to find a Thanksgiving hack in our text for today that can help us in seasons of uncertainty. As always, we look to God's holy word as our guide, and we do that today where we find Paul writing to the church in Philippi, the Philippians. Rejoice in the Lord always, he says. And then he feels the need to repeat himself. I will say it again, rejoice. Why does he feel a need to emphasize this repetitively? Well, because he's not only asking people to rejoice in the Lord, he's saying rejoice in the Lord always. Always? I think it's easy to rejoice in the Lord when things are going our way. When we get the job, we get the raise, we get the gal or the guy, things go our way. Yes, it's easy to rejoice. When things do not go our way, when we lose a job, when we face economic uncertainty, when we lose a loved one, maybe when we just face a trial in our lives, rejoice then. How do we do that? Well, we're going to learn in our message for today as we look to God's holy word. Rejoice in the Lord always. Do you know where Paul is when he's writing this? He's in prison. I mean, can you imagine somebody being incarcerated in prison and encouraging other people to rejoice always? But Paul was an interesting bird. He probably felt that he had prison coming. In a previous life, he had persecuted the church terribly, to the point of death, in the case of Stephen, the first Christian martyr after Jesus. But God had, he regarded himself as the worst of sinners, but God had reached him anyway. Perhaps, he said, to make me an example to others, that in the worst of sinners he might display his unlimited patience. He redeemed Paul's life. He made him into an apostle by loving him despite his sins. And Paul could not get over that. He could not quit thanking God for that. He could not quit rejoicing in that and being thankful for that. And his unconquerable joy became contagious. Everybody's got issues to face, challenges to their well-being. And when they see someone incarcerated in a prison who's able to rejoice in spite of it all, they're either a nut or they know a secret. And people would ask him about it. And they were told it was his faith in Jesus that was responsible for this. And it became contagious, even throughout the guards who were watching over him in his incarceration. In the letter from which our text comes, he writes, "Now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ." Paul's able to rejoice in otherwise dreary circumstances because even when persecution makes you more effective, his whole goal was to advance the gospel, and when persecution serves to advance what you're all about, you begin to see it differently. You begin to see it for the potential that is there, the divine potential, as God works through those uncertain times. Now, he feels a need to share this with the Philippians. Why? Because he's not the only one bearing a cross for the cause of the faith. He writes to them, "It has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe on him, but also to suffer for him, since you are going through the same struggle you saw I had, and now hear that I still have." Paul wants the Philippians to see their struggle, their suffering, their cross-bearing differently. He wants them to see it for the divine potential it has for them as a family of faith. He wants to replace their anxious thoughts with something much more productive and positive. He writes, "Do not be anxious about anything." Now, he's just told them to rejoice always, and this is another one of those statements. Don't be anxious about anything. Now, right now, as he's writing, their livelihoods are at risk. Their homes can be taken away from them, perhaps even their lives. They don't know. The early church is so new. The persecution that is surrounding them is just starting. There's a great deal of uncertainty. How do you find peace of mind in those circumstances? Paul tells them how. He gives them a Thanksgiving hack to overcome worry. "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." Will guard you against anxious thoughts, will guard you against unproductive worry, and will give you instead a peace that transcends all understanding. Nothing, pray about your situation, petition God to deliver you from it or to help you bear up under it, but add thanksgiving for what God has already done. There's nothing that helps us face uncertainty better than what is certain. And what is certain is gained by looking back and realizing how God has protected and provided for his people all along the way. When I look back at how God brought me and my family to this church, it's an amazing story how this unfolded. We're in Milwaukee. It's a great life. It's a great fit. We're having a whale of a good time. And God begins to create a holy discontent within me. He whispers these things and I don't hear him, and then he turns the volume up. But it became clear that God was saying, it's time for you to move from what is familiar, like Abraham moved to the promised land, and God called us to make a move. Now, I thought he was calling us to move to a community church in New Jersey. And in fact, due to some fortuitous circumstances, I was the last candidate standing there and applying for it out of about 125. Well, I had something most of them didn't. I was born and raised in a community church. That counted for something. They figured I knew the nature of the beast and maybe a few other attainments that made that possible. Nancy, on the other hand, is not sure at all about New Jersey. And I'm going, honey, you're just being negative. But just before I signed my name on the dotted line, news of another opportunity came to us in our home state of Ohio, another community church. And Nancy said, "That's what I'm talking about." My mom and dad, they snuck up here like spies to search out the promised land. Reverend Horak caught them. They did not tell him who they were. Now, my mom had an interesting critical eye, not a mean eye, but a very accurate eye. She came back and she said, "Bill, he's a nice man. And my dad said, sure looks like a good opportunity to me. Now, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. I had a bird in the hand out in New Jersey. And I'll tell you, the executive director of the International Council of Community Churches was not happy with old Bill. His exact quote, "This doesn't happen twice." I must be oppositionally defiant because with Nancy's strong encouragement, we said no to the one opportunity and started all over again. Probably against the same 125 candidates as before. Well, guess what? It happened again. We moved out here and there were some residual challenges that had to be resolved, but I never lost the sense that God had meant for this to happen. And the good Lord did resolve all of those challenges, and life has been really good for the Schnell family among you. But into every life, a little rain must fall. And there were storm clouds that gathered over the Schnell family at one point, and the congregation had to minister to the minister. I can't talk about this too much because I melt to a puddle. And we have a sermon to get through. But when I tell you what this congregation means to us and how God in His love reached to the depth of our souls, in a profound way. When I think about that, words fail me. And if there are any words at all and they're wholly inadequate, it is thank you. Thank you, God, for bringing us to this church. Thank you for this wonderful congregation and for loving us so deeply through these people. When I think about what God has done, my family's just filled with thanksgiving about it. That's all there is to it. And we are at peace with this decision. And we hope that you will be at peace with it as well. Now, that's an easy thing to say, but I want you to think for a moment about what this church has meant to you. There have been good times and precious memories that we have crafted to cherish for a lifetime. But there have been other times in our lives when we've received very difficult diagnosis, when we've lost a job and faced economic uncertainty, when we've lost a loved one, when we have made big mistakes and paid a big price for them. And someone in this family of faith looked at us and saw us differently and, said, welcome to the human race. We're all flawed individuals, but we're also all children of God. Once you have felt that redeeming love, you just want to give it to somebody else. Just like the Philippians felt it from Paul and wanted to give it to somebody else. When you think about what this church has meant to you, maybe you got it through one of the pastors. Probably you got it through a fellow church member or a tribe that you belong to within the family of faith. I want you to think in your life about that and what this congregation has meant and what God has already done. I think it can transform. In Thanksgiving, it can transform the uncertainty that lies ahead. When we realize how He has provided for us and brought us to this day, we don't need to worry about the future. You're facing a pastoral transition. So what? You know how many of those you faced in 208 years? You're a remarkable congregation. I was the president of the Ohio Council of Churches, and I know what a remarkable congregation. You're not going to have any problem at all. All you've got to do is to be receptive to that. Right now, as I speak, there's somebody, maybe in Milwaukee, I don't know, somebody somewhere trained for ministry who's feeling a holy discontent. Where's that coming from? And facing a world of uncertainty about, wow, relocating the family and everything. And that someone is uniquely suited for this place. And all you have to do is take a deep breath and trust the good Lord to guide you to that person, to guide that person to this place. And you're going to be just fine. And you're going to have somebody out there rooting for you all along the way. I can guarantee you that. Counting our blessings, what God has already done has the power to dispel uncertainty, to dispel fear, to replace it with a peace that transcends understanding. Let us rise as we count our blessings. Oh.